Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Hello, and welcome to Phoenix Business RadioX. I'm your host, Kendra Maples, and I'd like to welcome you to the AZ TechCast, sponsored by the Arizona Technology Council. Dedicated to covering innovation and technology in Arizona and beyond, AZ TechCast covers the critical issues and economic trends propelling the state's growing tech ecosystem. I'd like to thank our 2021 innovation sponsor, the Arizona Commerce Authority. They are the state's leading economic development organization with streamlined mission to grow and strengthen Arizona's economy. I'd also like to thank our 2021 Tech Advocate sponsor, JDH Insights, a leader in coaching and executive development. JDH Insights is committed to helping organizations cultivate and leverage their most important and complex asset, their humans. And with that, I'd like to give a warm welcome to today's featured guests. We have Rich Ryer, Senior Director of Site Reliability and Cloud Engineering at PayPal. We have Doran Miller, Principal at Miller Policy Consulting, and of course, our co-host, Steve Zylstra, President and CEO of the Arizona Technology Council. So today's TechCast, these distinguished experts will discuss the benefits of clean energy, the role of the Arizona Corporation Commission in adopting energy policies, how climate change is affecting us, and what's at stake. And of course, the renewable energy and how it can sustain with humankind. So with all of that being said, we have a lot of ground to cover. So I want to get started to make sure we have time for everybody. So first off, thank you and welcome, you guys.
Thanks for having us. Excited to be here.
Excellent. Rich, we're excited to have you and Steve and Doran here. Let's start real quick with a little bit about you guys before we really jump into the sustainability side of things. Let's hear a little bit about you guys and your company and kind of how you got to where you are today. Doran, do you want to go first?
Sure, happy to. So I have sort of found myself in the renewable energy policy, water, natural resources space. I don't want to say by accident, but it's not where I started my career. I did my sort of undergraduate studies primarily in policy, politics, American government. Spent a couple of years on Capitol Hill doing, policy issues, but not anything natural resource specific. I worked for Senator Kyle, actually, in his DC office. So, people here in Arizona know and love Senator Kyle. And went to law school, thought I was going to, go into litigation. I did constitutional litigation for a couple of years and really found that litigation was not for me. And I missed policy. I think, when you're an attorney and you're in litigation, you spend all day, every day fighting. Whereas with policy, you are building things and creating. And I felt that was a more inspiring place for me to be. So when I moved back to Phoenix, I'm born and raised here, Phoenix native. I moved back to Arizona from DC in 2014 and went to work at the Arizona Chamber of Commerce as a policy advisor and spent about 3 years there as a sort of policy generalist to begin, and then really started focusing more on water, energy, natural resource issues, and then went off on my own in 2017, 2018 maybe, and have been really focusing on these natural resource issues specifically. I think Arizona is just a really amazing and unique place to be focusing on things like water and renewable energy. We have a really long history of innovation and entrepreneurship and sort of looking at these challenges that we face and thinking really out of the box about how to solve them from a really market-driven and private sector-driven way, as opposed to really looking to government to always solve all of our problems and fix everything via mandates. And so it's a really fun space to work in. And I've just had the great pleasure of working with people like Steve on these issues. So that's who I am, a little bit about me.
That's fantastic. And I love that you've kind of made this transition a little bit. Like you said, you've kind of found yourself. And I love that. Rich, how about you? Tell us a little bit about you and kind of how you got to where you are with PayPal.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for having me today. My name is Rich Ryer. I lead our global data center services team. service delivery, design and architecture, operations and compliance, as well as our data center and cloud location strategy. I've been with PayPal now just over 5 years. Came over right after the split from eBay in 2015. I previously worked for eBay for almost 10 years prior to that. And that's really where I guess I started getting into and developed a passion for offsetting the energy that our data centers consume. There was multiple programs through different construction phases that we started to look at how we were using energy. And again, as big consumers of energy, I think at the time we were 65% of the total energy consumed by eBay across the company. So we had a big job ahead of us to try and offset that. I think our initial goals were to look for ways to be carbon neutral, but I definitely wanted to look for a way for us to offset our entire data center footprint with renewable energy, not just carbon neutral. Sustainability and driving efficiency has been a passion of mine for years. From the very beginning, throughout the years of construction, I always wanted to ensure we're doing the right things in the right way, not only from a risk and reliability perspective, but also from an efficiency perspective. I've always been competitive, and it was that competitive side of me that wanted to stand out above my peers in the industry by finding ways to push the boundaries of how we operate our data centers. I think back to 2015 when we split companies, as I mentioned, a large portion of the energy supplied to our data centers was from fossil fuels like coal. As massive consumers of energy, I knew early on that we wanted to find a way to not only reduce our carbon footprint, but to embrace the idea of offsetting our entire data center demand with renewable energy. So just long story short, but worked with utility providers, SRP, as a partner, as well as Arizona State University to kind of push that envelope and drive them to build out net new renewables. Worked with them in 2017 to bring on a 50 megawatt solar power plant in Red Rock, Arizona, that now offsets about 80% of our demand in Arizona.
Wow.
Can I because you said it's conversational, and Rich, everything you were just talking about really is, I think, a perfect example of what the sort of larger point I was getting at about how in Arizona, we so often are seeing like innovation and a push toward adoption of new technologies and better, smarter ways of doing things coming from the private sector. Right? Identifying opportunities to do something new and different, and then, pushing our utilities or pushing for the things that you want to see. And so, I think that that's just a beautiful example of a way in which that's happening in the renewable energy space.
Thank you both for being here. And I've had the pleasure of working with you both over the course of the last 6 months as well. I wanted to just, for any of our listeners who doesn't know about the Arizona Technology Council, we're a statewide technology trade association. We have almost 800 member companies across the state. We have offices in both Phoenix and Tucson. And one of the areas that we focus a lot of our attention on is policy, really being the voice and the face of the technology industry with the legislature, the governor's office, the congressional delegation, and organizations like the Arizona Corporation Commission. And the Tech Council really started to get involved in a significant way in clean energy about 4 years ago. One of the reasons for that is because there's this growing demand from our member companies for clean energy. Many of them have put a stake in the ground that says either their entire operation or, like PayPal, in the case of PayPal, that their data centers are going to be carbon neutral by some specific date. And that means that Arizona, the state, the utilities need to be prepared to provide that energy from clean sources. As I indicated, I got to work with Doran and Rich in the last 6 months because we did a number of roundtables with industry leaders, such as Rich, to find out what ideas they might have that would help Arizona in its economic recovery from COVID that would focus on clean energy. And Doran was representing the Western Way, which is kind of a conservative organization, but focused on practical, pragmatic solutions to climate change, getting us to zero carbon. So really excited to have these two on because they've been instrumental in some of the work we've done. And we'll let Doran tell you about the report we put together.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to, Steve. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes, as Steve mentioned, one of my clients is an organization called The Western Way. They're a nonprofit 501c3, and we really focus on issue advocacy around common sense, market-driven solutions to our environmental challenges. And, a huge part of that solution is investment and greater deployment in the clean and renewable energy sectors. And we were thrilled to partner with the Arizona Technology Council to convene these roundtable stakeholder groups to really hear from business and industry and the individuals and companies operating in this space and driving the R&D in the development of these solutions and implementing them. And we put together a fantastic report that we jointly released in December that really outlines categories of opportunity, sort of intended as a roadmap for policymakers. If you have policymakers at all levels, from the congressional delegation to the governor's office to our state legislature, if we want to help better incorporate the clean and renewable energy sector into Arizona's, post-COVID economic recovery and into the future to bring us to a place of overall carbon reduction, what do we do? And so we laid out a number of policy recommendations, everything from how to incentivize and get greater deployment of demand-side adoption of energy efficiency measures, to, opportunities to increase the sort of talent pipeline from our state's community colleges and state university systems into our clean and renewable energy and advanced manufacturing sectors. I think a really great recommendation in there has to do with creating a state level energy office. So you have an individual or group of individuals who are really taking a broad statewide view, how we can bring together all of these different pieces that are happening. We have so much R&D, so much amazing innovation that's going on. And on top of that, I think a lot of opportunities to bring in capital, whether it's private capital, federal grants, federal, to the extent that we get additional COVID relief dollars that are dedicated to renewable energy, which I think we all believe is likely to happen at some point in the future, somebody sort of driving that train. And I think everybody that participated in that roundtable stakeholder group agreed that having some high level individual or office overseeing this from a really broad network perspective would be hugely beneficial to the state.
And a couple of other recommendations in the report were the need to create more infrastructure in Arizona. As you probably have heard, we've got a couple of companies now here in Arizona that are going to be manufacturing electric vehicles. All the major automotive companies are moving toward electric and abandoning internal combustion engines. And as a consequence, we're going to need substantive infrastructure to support that electric transportation opportunity that we have. And we believe that can be accomplished through public-private partnership. This is not just a government thing, not just a corporate thing. It's about, working collaboratively to achieve the end goal of, again, reducing our carbon footprint, changing the momentum that climate change unfortunately has, and at the same time, growing our economy with these innovations and these technologies and these solutions to our biggest problems.
I'm glad you also mentioned hydrogen. I just want to say quickly, Steve, I think you just mentioned hydrogen. That was another recommendation in our report, is thinking strategically about how to plan for the integration of hydrogen into, a hydrogen economy. And as we think about the future of clean and renewable energy technology and overall reducing our emissions and getting to a place of net zero emissions, we can anticipate that the continued research and deployment of hydrogen is going to be a part of that. And so, rather than waiting until hydrogen is perfect, right? We should be planning now for what we see coming down the pipeline in the future.
And Doran, you were saying that the report that you guys put together was to help everyone when it comes to policy and whatnot. What's the status of Arizona's kind of clean energy policy right now? Like, where are we at? What's that look like?
Wow, that's quite a question. So the current standard that is on the books that was set by the Arizona Corporation Commission is from 2006. And so it's a pretty old standard. The Arizona Corporation Commission has been in a process for, I want to say 3 years now.
3.5, yeah.
3.5 years to update those standards. It has been a long, detailed, procedure-intensive process with many public hearings, lots of stakeholder input. I know the Technology Council has been a vocal stakeholder, has contributed to that, as has the Western Way, as have many, many other organizations. They adopted a plan to go into formal rulemaking at the end of 2020, entering formal rulemaking at the beginning of this year. That is really a product of bipartisan stakeholder work, and is reflective, frankly, of where we already are seeing our utilities and private sector going. So it includes it's a carbon reduction, 100% clean and renewable by 2050, which is a goal that our utilities had already announced that they were voluntarily committing to. The plan before the Corporation Commission also is interestingly, it's an emissions-based approach rather than a technology-based approach. That means that it's a 100% carbon free by 2050, but it doesn't mandate what technologies you need to get there or what percentage of clean or renewable has to come from solar versus this versus that. It's an emissions reduction approach because the overall goal is emissions reduction. And I think that's a really important piece of this plan. We're in a bit of a political fight at the moment that I would characterize as more of a turf war than anything else. The legislature is sort of attempting to take away the authority of the Corporation Commission to regulate in this area. There appears to be some disagreement. I will say I am an attorney. I'm not an expert in this area of law, but I have read the Arizona Constitution and I have read the relevant Arizona Supreme Court case. And it seems to me that the Arizona Constitution makes pretty clear that the Corporation Commission does have the authority to regulate in this area. And so unfortunately, rather than us having a conversation about how these new standards from the Corporation Commission are going to help Arizona attract new businesses, move us into the next sort of era of clean and renewable energy, help spur more innovation and research and development and technology. Instead, we are having a big conversation about this fight between the legislature and the Corporation Commission. And I guess I shouldn't even characterize it as a fight because the Corporation Commission isn't fighting. They have said, we have the authority to do this, and these are our rules. And so it's really a fight that the legislature is picking. And I think it's really an unfortunate distraction from a lot of the other exciting things that are going on that we really could be talking about. The efforts by Arizona's private sector, technology companies and others, and the efforts by the Corporation Commission to update, modernize our energy rules to reflect what is already going on should be the story. And
I want to turn to Rich next. PayPal is a very important company here in Arizona. Their investors, their customers, especially their employees, expect them to be good corporate citizens and protect our environment. And, that's one of the motivations that PayPal has for doing the things that they do. They also want to provide infrastructure for their employees who want to be in electric vehicles and so on, which, as you know, we discussed earlier, we don't have enough infrastructure in the state to support the coming wave of electric vehicles. So, Rich, it'd be great to hear from you about the philosophy of the company, the important things you've done, the stakes you've put in the ground, and the why.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And I'm glad that you brought this back up because I was thinking about that infrastructure and how we can't just tell our staff that we're making a difference, that we care about sustainability, environmental goals, but not lead by example. And I think back to one of the construction pieces on one of our data centers. I made the conscious choice to add charging stations, and not just to show the staff that, hey, here's an opportunity for you to help reduce our carbon emissions and our greenhouse gas goals, but it was a way for them to also give back. But I took it a step further, and instead of, like most companies, charge their employees to use those charging stations, I made it 100% free. So I really wanted to dig deep and incentivize our staff to do the right thing.
Nice.
And it went over really well. PayPal is a company, you're absolutely right, global company, more than 23,000 employees, over 300 million customers. I think last count, we were north of 12 billion payment transactions per year. In Arizona alone, we have about 2,000 employees spread out over about 5 facilities, 2 office locations, Chandler, Scottsdale, and 3 data center locations. From a sustainability program and our goals, environmental responsibility is critical. It's a critical part of upholding PayPal's values around the world. We're advancing our environmental sustainability program by mitigating our greenhouse gas emissions, managing our water consumption and resilience, and enhancing our waste management practices. PayPal has set a science-based target to reduce company-wide greenhouse gas emissions in line with the Paris Climate Agreement. We set a 100% renewable energy goal for our global data center operations. That's global, by the way, by 2023. And I'm happy to say we're well ahead of schedule. We will hit 90% of that goal by the end of this year. I'll add climate justice and equity. PayPal's mission to democratize financial services. We believe financial security is essential to helping financially underserved communities adapt to climate change. Climate change disproportionately, impacts poor and financially underserved communities. So it is our mission. It's in our blood. It's in our very foundation.
Rich,
and by the way, Kendra, for the audience, it turns out that data centers, we're number 2 in the nation for data centers. Only Virginia has more. But data centers store all of our information, right? This video call that we have right now will be stored in the cloud, which is in a data center somewhere. Data centers are so prolific that they are the number 1 consumer of power in Arizona. More so than manufacturing. Manufacturing is number 2. So that's one of the reasons it's so critical that these leading edge technology companies have this philosophy to move toward a sustainable future, because those data centers could have a very deleterious impact on our environment should these companies not be doing the right thing, as Rich said.
Absolutely. We just had another data center on one of the shows the other day. So it's one of those things we're trying to get you guys and get you into the community so people understand the things that you're doing too to be green and more sustainable. Rich, I want to go back to what you were saying about the charging stations, that you've put these charging stations in. How do you see as far as the use of them? And the reason why I'm asking this question is because I want to know what are some of the barriers that we see, especially here locally in Arizona, when it comes to people adapting electric vehicles more frequently?
So great question. I think adoption was really high when, we'll say initially it wasn't. I think it took some time for people to obviously invest themselves into electric vehicle. But once they did and they understood that, hey, this is an incentive, it's free for us to charge. It made a lot of sense for people that had to travel long distances. So adoption's been really high, and I think the staff have really enjoyed having that as a perk, if you will. We do the same thing, in our San Jose headquarters. Over 100 EV charging spaces there. Huge adoption. I think if you go when we were open pre-COVID and the parking lots were full, every one of those charging stations were in use. And I'm trying to work with leadership on the PayPal side to help them understand, again, to take that a step further and to make that free. I think just to further incentivize the staff to do the right thing.
And as far as all of these steps that we're taking here in Arizona, and then kind of going back to what Doran was talking about with some various, barriers with policy, and that it was, back in 2006, it's a little outdated. With all of this, where does Arizona kind of stand as a whole when it comes to clean energy? Are we behind? Are we par? Are we, and this is, either one of you, where do we stand in all of this?
I can start, I guess. So the relationship that we've had, the strong relationship we've had with the local utility, Arizona Public Service, and working through Arizona Corporation Commission has been awesome. I think we prodded them the right way and built on the partnership that we already had, and then again pulled in Arizona State University to build out that net new renewable asset in Red Rock, Arizona. Historically, signing anything more than a 3 to 5 year deal is just unheard of. This was a 20-year deal, so it took a lot of convincing on the eBay side and then also the PayPal side when they came over to PayPal to make that happen. But it was the right thing to do, and we're I think 3 or 4 years into that now, and are seeing the results of it, being able to offset, like I said, over 80% of our footprint through what's delivered from Red Rock, and then we use the Green Choice program for flexibility on additional credits as we flex up or flex down on our on-prem workloads.
Kendra, I would say that in a multitude of areas, we're a leader. We have some of the most significant installed solar in the nation. We're one of the sunniest places in the country and a really good place to use solar. We're a leader because we have a nuclear power plant, which does not produce any carbon. People are concerned about nuclear for other reasons, but it does produce a massive amount of non-carbon related energy. And I would say what the Corporation Commission has been doing that Doran described over the last 3.5 years has been exerting leadership and, putting the stake in the ground in 2050 to be carbon neutral is incredible. I would say that what the legislature is doing this session to try and take the legs out from under that is a regressive step. We have concern about it because companies like PayPal, they want certainty with regard to the environment they're operating in. And when the state establishes rules or mandates, that they know where the state stands. And if that rug is pulled out from under them, then there's going to be a lot of uncertainty about the future here in Arizona. And as a consequence, companies have many, 49 other states to locate in. And particularly technology companies are so conscious about sustainability and want to be on the leading edge. And they want to be in a place that is also on the leading edge. So I think there's, in many ways, we're leading. There's some hurdles and barriers to overcome at the moment. Hopefully we do. But I'm sure Doran has other things to add about our leadership in this area.
Yeah, Steve, you actually really hit on the main points that I wanted to make in a great and succinct way, which is to say that we are a leader in many, many ways. And the effort to update the energy rules and the, huge amounts of input that we've seen from, everyone from consumers to business groups to other interested parties and stakeholders has been a real example of leadership in this area. I don't think, and frankly, I think as demonstrated by, what Rich has talked about with PayPal and other companies we're seeing here, we don't need a government mandate in order to move the needle, right? Our utilities have made voluntary commitments. Southwest Gas is working on its own, renewable natural gas and power to gas R&D to get them to lower their like voluntarily lower greenhouse gas emissions, and private companies, we're all doing it. What updated energy rules do for us is create that market certainty that Steve was talking about. And I think both of those things are really important pieces of the puzzle to ensure that Arizona really remains a national leader. We don't need the government to force us, force businesses, force companies to do things. This is the direction people are already going. This is what businesses and industry and consumers are wanting to see, and what utilities are realizing they need to be able to provide. And then the government needs to come in and provide that market certainty by matching policy to these goals and long-term goals and the direction that we're already going.
And Kendra, I would say that people might question if the utilities are already moving in this direction, why do we need rulemaking by government to provide these so-called mandates? It's critical that the state exert leadership. It's important for market certainty that the industry knows what the goals are. And, if we pull back on these energy rules that, like I said, zero carbon by 2050, it's going to send exactly the wrong message from an economic development standpoint to the marketplace. And again, as I said before, people have options, and they want to be in a place that's exerting that kind of leadership, particularly progressive thinking organizations, right? And as I said earlier, many of these companies are now being driven by what their employees want, right? Employees have a big stake, and they're expressing themselves within the corporate culture, and it shapes the corporate culture, as Rich inferred earlier in his discussion. So, I think there are people in the legislature that understand this, believe this, but as Doran said earlier, this turns out to be sort of a turf war, and the energy rules are caught in the middle of this turf war.
I actually Steve, you said something that made me want to make one additional point that I think is important, because I've heard it come up a little bit in this debate over whether or not the Corporation Commission should even be doing updated energy rules, which I've heard a lot of comparisons to Proposition 127. And, for anyone that might not remember, that was the Steyer initiative from a couple of years ago that was going to mandate certain energy benchmarks. And one of the important, I think really critically important things to remember about what's going on at the Corporation Commission right now with energy rules is it's part of a rulemaking, which means it's flexible. It can change. The Corporation Commission can pass rules that set 100% carbon free by 2050, and then maybe 2035 rolls around and, things have gone in a different direction. Maybe we can meet it sooner. Maybe we need extra years. Those rules can be changed. Whereas something passed by a citizen initiative, because of, the Voter Protection Act that we have here and our citizen initiative rules, it's set in stone and it can't be changed. And so, while some have described this energy rules package before the Corporation Commission as, just a Prop 127 redux that voters rejected, the rules package under consideration right now it's not comparable in really any way. And I guess I should also say the Western Way and other groups have done a lot of polling of Arizona voters, what they want to see from Arizona's energy portfolio, what they want to see the government doing on energy. And I would say across party lines, across demographic lines, across urban versus rural, people in general want to see more investment in clean and renewable energy technology. They want to see it. They're largely overwhelmingly supportive of more clean and renewable energy options.
Yeah.
Another point around, Kendra, around this leadership issue is that currently, for instance, at APS, there's some great leadership, and that leadership is moving and it's relatively new, and moving the organization in the direction that we're we're talking about. And I would say that about the other utilities as well. But leadership in corporations can change. And when it changes, so can the roadmap, the path they're taking. And that's why some don't feel you can rely on the utilities to do the right thing because it depends. And as you know, our biggest public utility is it's a monopoly, but it's also a traded stock, right? So it's a little different than a traditional utility, and we just want to make sure that our trend continues, regardless of who's at the helm of these private sector entities.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that both of you mentioned was, the voters, the consumers, the people. So yes, we have these big corporations that are obviously moving all of this forward, but we've got the little people, right? And Rich, you said that there was excitement and interest from your staff when they saw those charging stations. Are there things that, we can help? Like, is there communication we can get out there to the little people to influence these corporations as well? I mean, a lot of this, right, Rich, with PayPal, a lot of this is coming from internally. The people want these changes to happen, and then the corporations start to build and change. Is there anything else when it comes to, I mean, obviously a lot of this momentum happens at that bigger corporate level, but Rich, like, what are you seeing from your employees and your staff internally? Are there things that they can do to kind of contribute to help with this movement?
Wow. I mean, it's yeah. So I mean, again, we set the example from a leadership perspective, and again, doing the right thing from a company perspective. I think the things that we've already done in Arizona and working with the utility providers to deliver, renewable energy, and what was a great step, and it was showing our staff that we mean what we say what we do, mean what we say, kind of thing, and we stood behind our goals. So I think that in itself is helping them to see that we are going in the right direction, and that we encourage that. I don't know specifically what I would say they can do individually, other than adoption of like EV electric vehicles, and encouraging other businesses to incentivize their employees similar to what we did, and take a stance on that in line, obviously, with their global impact goals. Mm-hmm. I agree with Stephen that infrastructure is lacking in Arizona. I think Arizona, as part of our location strategy as a company, to continue bringing additional staff here, knowing the issues we have right now with our freeways, and not having the renewable or EV type infrastructure in place, again, as an incentive to when they're demanding things like that, they want to see that wherever they're going, obviously tied to being more efficient and reduction in cost of living and those kinds of things. But we still have a ways to go.
Go ahead, Dawn.
I was just going to say, from a, sort of a what can we individual little people do to move the needle? I think one of the things that we often forget about is just sort of that basic grassroots, call your representative. If this is an issue that you care about, and we all should, because it's not just the big picture, right? It's also air quality, things that we all deal with every day. You call your state representatives, your state senators, governor's office, write letters. And at the end of the day, the folks in the state legislature, they want to do what they believe is responsive to their constituencies. And so if they're not hearing from a ton of their constituents that this is an issue that people care about, they don't know that it's an issue people care about. So, that's just sort of my little plug for grassroots advocacy. Yeah. Call your elected official.
It's absolutely true. If they're not hearing from anybody, then how are they supposed to know? Absolutely.
So one of the other things that is an opportunity here for Arizona is to become a leader in the electric vehicle industry. So another thing that the Arizona Corporation Commission has done over the last few years is developed a electric vehicle implementation plan, which begins to address some of the infrastructure needs and so on that we're talking about. In order to get where we want to go, you need a plan, and it's ACC has been working on that. And again, if these legislative efforts are successful, all that's going to be for naught as well. And we have two major companies now in Arizona that have built or are building factories to produce electric vehicles. One is in Casa Grande. It's called Lucid Motors. And before this year is out, they'll be producing electric vehicles that will compete with the likes of Tesla. And then over in Coolidge, actually, corporate headquarters and R&D operations in Phoenix, but their manufacturing plant that's being built as we speak is in Coolidge, is Nikola. And Nikola is going to build Class 8 over-the-road, 18-wheel electric vehicles that are hydrogen powered. So to the point that Doran was making earlier, hydrogen has no carbon in it, and the output of using hydrogen is water, which is a good thing. And but these are electric vehicles. Hydrogen is the means by which these electric vehicles will be powered. So we have the potential to be a leading state in the nation in this transformation that's going on in the transportation industry. And but if at the same time we don't build the infrastructure that's necessary to utilize electric vehicles, we're not going to be showing the kind of leadership that's necessary for us to take off. So we have the ability to attract more and more companies. We're here in Arizona, that's close to Mexico. As you know, Mexico has a huge automotive industry. And so the supply chains necessary to build these vehicles are just across the border. So that's an opportunity that's going to be critical to our future.
So, Steve, on that note, this kind of ties into another thing that I wanted to bring up today. So the new White House administration, they have this plan to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So you're already talking about, here in Arizona, right, locally, where we have these corporations that are building electric vehicles using hydrogen. So that's that first step, right? And then what are the next steps? What does the rest of that transition look like away from fossil fuels and, methane gas and whatnot, and utilizing hydrogen a little more? What else is part of that transition?
Well, to a point, Rich talked about, you have to have consumer adoption, right? That's the demand side of it. People have to want these vehicles. They have to buy these vehicles. And then in order for the industry to be successful, you have to have the infrastructure in place to support them. So hydrogen fueling stations, electric vehicle recharging stations, you need innovation so that these vehicles can be charged very fast. And a lot of that technology is being developed as we speak. So and that, again, is really a private-public partnership to put that infrastructure in place. You've already heard that Rich's company has put charging stations in their campus, and 100 of them in their campus in Silicon Valley. So the private sector plays a role, but it won't happen without federal and state governmental support and investment in the necessary infrastructure. It's just like roads and bridges and dams and so on. It's the necessary infrastructure for that particular type of mobility to be successwe may want to add to that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that last point that you hit on is really critical. It's, we need the infrastructure, but, in order to have that infrastructure is obviously huge infrastructure projects are incredibly expensive, and we can't expect the private sector to carry the costs of a statewide infrastructure project on their own. It really truly is a, private, state, federal partnership. Dollars are going to come in. We're going to need to get those dollars in. And then we're going to need to be able to turn around and use them in a very strategic and coordinated way to make sure that infrastructure is appropriately planned and deployed in ways that make sense and that can enable us to, implement and deploy the technology in ways that make sense. I think we already have a great example in Arizona, actually, of a huge scale infrastructure project that relied very heavily on federal dollars, which is the Central Arizona Project, right? Look at the Central Arizona Project. If the private sector in Phoenix and Tucson had to get together and build a canal to get water from the Colorado River to our urban population centers, it would not have happened without really having the federal government and federal investment as part of that. So, I'm not saying that necessarily our statewide EV infrastructure or otherwise is going to exactly mimic that, but I think that is a good example of something that we have already done here in this state, and why investment from the federal government into that kind of infrastructure project is so critical.
And, because of some of the things we've discussed, ADOT is a critical partner in all of this, right? So there are multiple state agencies that, we talked about the ACC, we've talked about the legislature, ADOT, the Arizona Commerce Authority has, been working on mobility, particularly autonomous vehicle mobility issues. So there's a number of state agencies that have a place at the table because their involvement is critical in the success of developing this new infrastructure.
And it's another reason that speaks to the importance of having an energy office, right? Because then you have a person that is coordinating all of these efforts at the different agencies, that is aware of where the sources of federal investment might come from, that is also integrating and communicating with the private sector efforts. And so you have somebody that is thinking strategically and bringing all of these pieces together, connecting all of these dots to enable us to really, be effective and successful as we do this. We need a project manager.
Hey, we have them on this show too, on this station. Rich, is there anything else that you wanted to add to kind of this? We're kind of getting to the wrap up of the show. We're almost to that time. It's amazing how fast this goes. But did you have anything else to add to kind of this conversation about transition?
Thank you. I keep going back to Stephen's comments on infrastructure. I have firsthand experience with lack of infrastructure. I've walked the walk, talked the talk. So I have an EV. Drive an EV, have been for the last 3-4 years. I remember back to a situation I was, I had so much charge left on my vehicle, and I went to the southern part of the valley for an appointment. And when I got back in the car and I was headed back home, it said, "You don't have enough power to get you back home." So I was looking then, scrambling to try to find the nearest charging station. And I knew that there was one right off the 10 and Ray Road. So I went to that and had enough power to get there. Time I got there, both the charging stations had vehicles already connected to them. And that's kind of a shopping center. So people are just out and about. You don't know when they're going to come back. And I'm down to like 2%. And I get on and I'm looking for the next charging station. And I went through this like several charging stations. They weren't there. And I finally had to pull over, and I end up getting towed to the dealership because I ran out of power. So it is absolutely a problem. I think for clear adoption, strong adoption of EV, the infrastructure absolutely needs to be there. We need to continue to invest there. I would also add that, at least from a company perspective and a data center ownership perspective, it's not just how do we offset the energy that we use, but it's how do we use the energy more efficiently? How do we innovate internally and look for ways to reduce our consumption of that same energy? And we've adopted some of those things in Arizona, deploying modular data centers use evaporative cooling technology, super efficient. So it reduces, again, our demand on the system.
By the way, one of the barriers to public acceptance of EVs is charging anxiety, believe it or not, because people, it's like, how you feel if you think you're going to run out of gas. Imagine having to feel that way all the time because you have to find the next charging station. That's the real barrier. So getting that infrastructure in place is going to be necessary to get, more adoption from the public.
Yeah. And then, Rich, when you were telling that story, I'm thinking in my head, it's not like you can, and maybe you can tell me the answer to this, but can you pull it up on your phone where charging stations are? It's not necessarily the same as, like, Steve, what you're saying. There's gas stations all over the place, so it's not as much of that anxiety feeling. But, Rich, you said you were looking for locations.
Yeah, and you can do that. Definitely on your phone.
That's
Tesla has the app that will pull up and you can look for non-Tesla stations. But again, when you get there, there's low confidence that they'll actually be up and running and allow you to charge, which I ran into. But even getting online with Tesla and them directing me to one of their premier charging stations, it was a house. It was this large house that was fenced, and there's no charging station here. So a little frustrating, but definitely we need, it just shows that we need to invest more in that infrastructure. I think also from a hydrogen perspective, I would love to see more hydrogen adoption. I think back to some of the European car manufacturers years ago had put out 100 vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, but the infrastructure and we have people that love that technology, and I think it's super cool. But if you don't have the infrastructure, people are not going to adopt it.
Absolutely, it's got to be a group, a country. It's got to be everybody working together. Think about when the first fax machine was made, right? Who did he fax to? So you got to all work together. So I absolutely enjoyed the conversation today. We are almost at that top point. I want to give Steve the chance to give any last words, and then I'm going to let each of you give your last wrap up as well.
Well, I just want to express my appreciation to Doran and Rich for being here today. They are two experts in the field. There's no doubt about it. This whole issue of clean energy and electric vehicles is critical policy work for the Arizona Technology Council. We're representing our members. They are demanding more clean energy. Both the private sector and the government, state and federal, have to step up and make this happen. We have an opportunity to be a leader here in Arizona. If we don't step out, someone else will. And I want us to be the leader.
I will just say also, to echo that, thank you so much to Steve for inviting me to join you. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I love Arizona. As I said at the beginning, I was born and raised here, Arizona native, and to see how the Phoenix area and Arizona as a state has grown and changed over the last 4 decades is really tremendous. And, we are here at a point where there is just so much opportunity ahead of us to continue to innovate and be entrepreneurial and, do amazing things and show our leadership, nationally, globally. And it's a really, really fun, cool, interesting, and, inspirational space to be working in. And I'm just so happy to be here and, be surrounded by amazing people also working in this space to forge ahead.
Awesome. And Rich, any last thoughts from you?
I just would echo what Stephen and Doran said. Thank you, Stephen, for getting me involved in this and allowing me to be a part. I'll just say that, PayPal's mission and values are connected to this work. We can see those communities that we're trying to serve and promote financial wellness are the same individuals that are most impacted by the effect of climate change. We have a long-term opportunity to drive progress, not only for our direct company, but also for the millions that could benefit from a strong, clean energy economy.
Mm-hmm. And as we wrap up today, Rich, if anybody is interested in reaching out to you and PayPal, what's the best way that they can connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, so happy to field any questions that we may have missed.
Perfect. And Doran, what about you?
Yeah, likewise, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. My direct message feature on Twitter is open, so you can get me that way. And I think my email is also out there, and I think maybe was part of the stuff for this. I won't spell it out because it's long, but I'm easy to find. There are not a lot of Doran Millers in Phoenix.
Perfect. Well, awesome. Well, thank you to the both of you. You've been listening to AZ TechCast, brought to you by Phoenix Business RadioX. Today's AZ TechCast was brought to you by the Arizona Commerce Authority, the state's leading economic development organization, with a streamlined mission to grow and strengthen Arizona's economy. And many thanks to JDH Insights, the 2021 Tech Advocate sponsor. Visit jdhinsights.com to enhance leadership and improve team dynamics to take your business to the next level. If you're interested in being on the podcast as a participant or sponsor for the Council's AZ TechCast, contact marketing@aztechcouncil.org to lock in your opportunity to have a further conversation and position you as an expert, influencer, and innovator in this tech community. Until next time, I'm Kinder Maples for Business RadioX, and we had our co-host today, Steve Zylstra. Thank you for listening and joining us today.